Mister, would you mind being my father for just 24 hours? The child's plea reached the businessman's ears like a whisper cutting through thunder. This isn't what I requested. Harold Blake's voice carried its usual edge as he set the incorrect beverage down with deliberate precision. The young cashier fumbled with her receipt, clearly rattled. My apologies, I assumed... Your assumptions have made me late, he interrupted, straightening his expensive jacket. Harold never raised his voice. His commanding presence spoke volumes without the need for shouting. The Manhattan market buzzed with growing impatience behind him. Whispered complaints and frustrated glances rippled through the waiting customers. Harold remained unmoved. Excellence was non-negotiable, and mistakes, regardless of their size, simply weren't tolerated. Then a small voice pierced the tension like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Mister, would you mind being my father for just 24 hours? Harold pivoted. Before him stood a child barely past kindergarten age, her golden ringlets catching the fluorescent light. Those enormous blue eyes held a sincerity that could stop traffic. She wore a worn pink sweatshirt and colorful mismatched socks that told stories of carefree mornings. A woman hurried forward, breathless and flustered. Anna, she called, dropping to the child's level and gently taking her shoulders. You cannot disappear like that, sweetheart. Looking up at Harold with obvious embarrassment, she attempted damage control. Her blonde hair escaped from a hastily assembled braid, and her tired coat spoke of long hours and little rest. Even exhausted, her beauty was undeniable, the kind that comes from within and refuses to be dimmed by circumstances. Please forgive us, she began, pulling Anna closer. She sometimes speaks without thinking. Actually, I meant exactly what I said, Anna interrupted with startling clarity. Tomorrow our school celebrates fathers, and everyone's bringing their dads. Since I don't have one, I wondered if maybe you could help me out. Harold found himself speechless. The meeting, the water, the line of irritated customers, everything faded. This tiny human looked at him without fear or pretense, dismantling years of carefully constructed emotional barriers with nothing but honest hope. I'm terribly sorry, the woman repeated, attempting to guide Anna toward the exit. We'll leave immediately. Hold on, Harold found himself saying. Both froze in place. Harold studied the woman intently. Your daughter, he said quietly. What do you call her? Anna Grace, came the hesitant reply. I'm Hannah. I spend afternoons at the local library and evenings waiting tables downtown. We're not asking for handouts, I promise. Hannah's voice caught. She misses something she's never actually experienced. Harold's gaze returned to Anna. Most children would have hidden behind their parent by now, but she continued meeting his eyes with unwavering faith. Something compelled him to ask, what happened to her biological father? Hannah's answer came softly. He died in a collision when she was barely 2. She has no memories of him. The store had gone completely quiet. Harold felt something shift inside him. In boardrooms, empty penthouses, echoing corridors where his footsteps never waited for anyone else. He'd mastered the art of leaving first. Yet here, in this tiny corner market, a little girl had asked him to stay for just one day. Tomorrow, he said slowly. What time does this father event begin? Hannah blinked in surprise. 10 in the morning at her school. But really, you don't need to. I'll be there, he stated simply. Anna's face lit up like a Christmas morning. You really mean it, she breathed. Harold nodded once. But only for one day. She beamed radiantly. Hannah, too stunned for words, watched as this man who seemed to own the entire metropolis crouched to Anna's eye level and said with something dangerously close to warmth, You'd better have a plan ready. I don't handle disorder well. Anna giggled, and Harold Blake, Wall Street's most intimidating figure, left the store carrying not his intended purchase, but a promise that would change everything. Dawn brought crisp winds that reminded the city of winter's lingering presence. Hannah sat beside Harold on a weathered bench outside Anna's school, clutching lukewarm coffee like a lifeline. She doesn't really comprehend what having a father means, Hannah said, breaking their comfortable silence. She was an infant when he passed, but children sense what's absent. Harold watched Anna skip along the sidewalk's edge like a tightrope performer, her small backpack bouncing with each step. A pale yellow ribbon adorned her hair, slightly crooked but perfectly her. "She's intelligent," he observed. "She's my entire universe," Hannah replied. Harold remained quiet, his expensive watch catching the morning light. "I didn't intend for her to corner you yesterday," Hannah continued. "She's unique, special in ways that make her feel the empty spaces more acutely than other children." "I don't do children," Harold stated bluntly. "I gathered that," Hannah almost smiled, "which makes your agreement even more puzzling." He turned to really see her then. Exhaustion was evident, but beneath it lay something unbreakable. Strength forged by storms most people never weather. "I'm still figuring that out myself," he admitted quietly. Anna bounded back toward them, glowing with excitement. "Come on! It's time. They want us to bring our fathers to the activity room." Harold rose, adjusting his coat. He hesitated briefly before extending his hand. Anna grabbed it without thinking, her tiny fingers wrapping around his with complete trust. As they entered the school, Hannah followed, watching her daughter look up at Harold like he'd always belonged there. The classroom was chaos: finger paints, cardboard castles, and construction paper tags reading, "My Dad and Me." Harold stood out dramatically, 6 feet of business sophistication in a sea of casual wear. But Anna didn't notice. She pulled him through every station, laughing as he awkwardly attempted crafts and playground games. Other parents watched curiously, some recognizing him from financial publications, but maintaining respectful distance. Then came reading time. Children nestled into beanbags while fathers shared stories. Anna climbed into Harold's lap, settling in as if it were the most natural thing imaginable, and handed him a crayon-illustrated book titled, "My Daddy is a Superhero." Harold hesitated. "Read it," Anna whispered. So he did. His voice, typically reserved for strategy meetings and investor calls, gentled as he read each page. Halfway through, Anna leaned back against his chest and closed her eyes. "You feel secure," she murmured. "Like a real father." Harold's chest constricted. Through the window, he spotted Hannah watching them, tears glistening in her eyes. He looked down at the little girl in his arms. She wanted nothing more than a hand to hold for just one day. And somehow, Harold realized he wanted to be that hand, even if he couldn't explain why. The special day arrived with soft gray skies and rain-washed streets. But inside the preschool, laughter echoed off walls covered in bright artwork. Daddy Day was scrawled in crayon across a banner above the classroom entrance. Harold stood with Anna at the threshold, adjusting his tailored coat. He'd traded his usual power suit for something softer: dark trousers, a navy sweater, and a crisp shirt. Still, he radiated control and precision, a boardroom warrior among beanbags. Anna tugged his hand, eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Ready?" she asked. "Not remotely," he muttered, but followed her inside anyway. The room buzzed with hyperactive energy as children bounced around with their fathers, who fumbled with art supplies and read picture books with exaggerated voices. Anna stood proudly in the room's center. "This is my daddy," she announced clearly. "Just for today." All eyes turned. Some fathers did double takes. A mother near the door whispered to her friend with wide eyes. The teacher, Miss Lynn, blinked twice before approaching. "Mr. Blake," Harold said simply, shaking her hand. "Welcome, Mr. Blake. We're delighted you could join us." Anna positively glowed. They moved through activities together. Harold painted a shaky rainbow with Anna, his strokes initially rigid, then loosening. She crowned him with a paper tiara decorated with glitter glue and crooked stickers. He drew the line at singing time, but barely. At the modeling clay table, Anna sculpted a tiny family trio: a little girl, a blonde-haired mother, and a tall, suited man with round clay spectacles. "That's us," she whispered. "Just for today." Harold stared at the figures, his jaw tight. Then came circle time. Children gathered in a ring beside their fathers. Miss Lynn clapped her hands. "Today we're sharing stories, real or imagined, about your daddy that makes you happy." Harold felt Anna squeeze his hand. She stood tiny and radiant, surveying the circle. "My daddy takes me on grand adventures," she began. "We explore vast cities and have tea parties with tigers. He wears a cape beneath his work clothes and keeps monsters away from my closet. He reads me stories that fill my dreams. He's strong and quiet, but when I laugh, he laughs too. The room stilled completely. And sometimes, she added, her voice trembling slightly, he appears exactly when I need him most. Harold stared at her, transfixed. Anna returned to sit beside him, slipping her small hand into his palm without a word. He held it tight. Miss Lynn cleared her throat. Thank you, Anna. That was beautiful. Outside the window, Hannah had come to deliver Anna's forgotten lunchbox. But seeing Harold kneeling on the carpet beside her daughter, wearing a paper crown and holding clay hands, she couldn't interrupt. Anna's words carried through the glass, each one piercing deeper than the last. Tears welled and spilled silently as she pressed her palm to the window, overwhelmed by witnessing something she never thought her daughter would experience. Not pretense, not performance, but something genuine. Inside, Anna leaned against Harold's arm. You're doing wonderfully, she whispered. He looked down at her, unable to speak because something in his chest had cracked open, and he wasn't sure he wanted it healed. That evening, as the city glowed in twilight, Harold did something unprecedented. He made dinner reservations for 3. No business associates, no assistants, no silent negotiations over stakes and mergers. Just a golden-haired little girl, her quietly luminous mother, and the man who was beginning to question whether the walls he'd built were worth their cost. This is just to conclude things properly, Harold had told himself when extending the invitation. But the moment Anna squealed with delight upon seeing him waiting outside the small bistro, Harold knew nothing about this would be tidy. They occupied a corner table by the window. Soft music played, lights warm and dim. Anna bounced in her seat, studying the children's menu. Do they serve macaroni and cheese with the crispy topping? She asked. They do now, Harold said with a half smile, signaling the waiter. Hannah laughed softly, shaking her head. You don't need to indulge her. Just for tonight, he said. It's fine. As dinner arrived, conversation flowed more easily than Harold expected. Anna chattered endlessly about her favorite picture books, her goldfish's peculiar expressions during feeding time, and her plans to become both a marine mammal veterinarian and an astronaut. But then, as dessert was served, it happened. Anna turned to him completely at ease and said, Daddy, can I show you my drawing now? Hannah froze, opening her mouth to correct her, but Harold stopped her gently with a look and a soft smile. Just for tonight, he repeated quietly. Anna pulled a folded paper from her backpack and spread it on the table. It was a crayon drawing, uneven but joyful. 3 stick figures stood beneath a yellow sun, one tall, one medium, one tiny, all smiling. Above it, in colorful block letters, she had written, Me, Mommy, and my daddy. Harold's throat constricted. He stared at the paper like it was a window into a life he'd never dared imagine. It's us, Anna said proudly. I drew it after school. Harold couldn't speak. The silence that followed was profound, not awkward, but sacred. Then slowly Harold set his fork down and looked across the table. His voice was quiet and fractured at the edges. I had a son, he said, and a wife. Her name was Elise. Our boy was James. He had dark hair and endless questions about how everything worked. Hannah watched him gently, waiting. I missed his first-class project, the one where fathers come to help build volcanoes, Harold continued. I promised him I'd make the next one, claimed I had unavoidable work. Always work. He gazed out the window briefly, then back at them. That morning, Elise begged me to go, but I insisted I had a meeting that couldn't be postponed, so she took him alone. His hands slowly clenched on the table. They were struck by a drunk driver 2 blocks from the school. Hannah gasped quietly. Harold's voice dropped to barely audible. They died instantly. Silence fell again, thicker now, raw with shared anguish. I was too late, he whispered. I missed every moment that mattered, and now I live with the silence they left behind. His eyes were red, his voice frayed, but no tears fell. He hadn't allowed himself to cry since the funeral. Across the table, Hannah slowly reached out and placed her hand over his. She didn't apologize or speak of fate or healing. She just held his hand like something precious. "Maybe you missed those moments then," she said, her voice soft as a promise. "But you don't have to miss them now. Every child wants someone who makes an effort. Anna doesn't need perfection. She needs presence." Harold looked at her, stunned by the grace in her words. For the first time in years, someone saw all of him and didn't turn away. Then he felt a small hand on his cheek. Anna had stood on her seat and leaned in, her tiny palm warm against his face. "If you were a sad daddy before," she whispered, "maybe now you can be a happy one for me." His heart shattered. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of something irreplaceable. "I don't deserve you," he choked out. Anna's voice was no louder than a breath. "But I chose you anyway." And in that moment, the past didn't disappear, but it stopped winning. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Hannah's hands trembled as she folded her apron and placed it on the counter. The diner manager, a balding man with a clipboard and perpetual frown, refused to meet her eyes. "I don't want complications," he said flatly, "but we can't have employees involved with corporate figures, especially not with the company that owns this building." Hannah's heart sank. "I didn't even realize until recently that He cut her off. "You brought him here, had lunch with him while in uniform. Customers talk, someone upstairs heard. It doesn't look good. They think you're working an angle." "I wasn't," she said, almost pleading. "I'd never—" "I'm sure," he said, "but perception is everything." And that was that. Hours later, Hannah sat on a worn bench at the bus stop, her coat wrapped tightly around her, and Anna nestled against her side. The little girl didn't understand why her mother's hands shook, or why she hadn't spoken for 15 minutes straight. She just knew something was wrong. "Mommy," Anna whispered, "are we in trouble?" "No, baby," Hannah choked out. "Not trouble, just tired." Her eyes stung, her head ached, and all she could think was how quickly everything good slipped away the moment she dared believe it might stay. Then headlights. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The back door opened before the engine cut. Harold stepped out. He looked around once, then saw them huddled together under a flickering street lamp. Hannah looked up, startled, wiping her face quickly. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice raw. But he didn't answer her. Instead, he walked straight to Anna, knelt down on the pavement, and met her eyes. His voice was low, fierce with emotion. "No one gets to hurt your mommy, not while I'm here." Hannah blinked, surprised, then smiled slowly, sweetly, and wrapped her arms around his neck. Hannah stared at them, heart thundering in her chest. "She lost her job," Harold said, looking up at her, "because of me." "It's not your fault," Hannah whispered. "Yes, it is," he said, standing. "And I don't intend to let it remain that way." 2 days later, Hannah walked into the offices of the Blake Foundation, a quiet but powerful philanthropic arm of Harold's company. She had barely crossed the threshold when she heard it, tiny feet sprinting down the hall. "Daddy!" Anna's voice rang out like sunshine. Harold turned just in time to catch her as she jumped into his arms. She clung to him like he was her whole world. "Did you miss your little girl, Daddy?" Harold held her close, smiling softly. "I always do." Everyone in the lobby watched, but no one said a word. The man they had only known as ruthless, calculated Harold Blake was something else entirely in that moment. He sat Anna down, then turned to Hannah. "I want you here," he said. "As my personal assistant for the foundation, I need someone who cares deeply about people. And you? You've never stopped caring, even when it cost you." Hannah swallowed hard. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," he said. "It's a second chance for both of us." She looked at Anna, still clutching his hand, and realized something deep and true. Maybe second chances didn't come wrapped in perfection, but they came wrapped in presence, and that was enough. It happened gradually, like spring quietly entering after a long, brutal winter. They never discussed it, never declared a new beginning, or crossed any official line. But somehow, between school pickups and late dinners, bedtime stories and grocery runs, the three of them became more than coincidence. They became a family. Harold started leaving work early, not because he had to, but because he wanted to read to Anna before bed. He brought home books about space and animals and silly monsters who brushed their teeth. He did voices, terrible ones, but Anna loved them. Every night she climbed onto his lap, curled against his chest and whispered, "One more page, Daddy." And every night he said, "Yes." Hannah watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. She tried not to read into it, tried not to fall into something she couldn't control, but she was already falling. She loved the way Harold tied Anna's shoes too tightly and had to redo them twice. She loved the way he carried a spare hair tie in his coat pocket just in case. She loved the way he looked at her, like he saw her not just as a single mother or a burden, but as someone with worth. And that terrified her because she had known hope before, and she had known what it felt like when it slipped through her fingers. One Friday evening, Anna came home from school unusually quiet. She pushed away her dinner, then leaned against Harold on the couch, her face warm and pale. "Sweetheart," Hannah knelt beside her. "What's wrong?" "My tummy hurts," Anna whispered. An hour later, she had a fever of 103 degrees. Hannah panicked, running cold cloths over her daughter's forehead, calling the pediatrician, checking symptoms. Harold stayed calm until Anna began to cry in her sleep. And then he wasn't calm anymore. He sat beside her bed, holding her hand, brushing her damp curls back from her face. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe. I've got you." But then Anna stirred, her voice a broken whimper. "Don't leave me too, Daddy." Harold froze. Every part of him shattered at once. He hadn't cried in years, not at the funeral, not in the months after. But now, as that tiny voice pierced through the dark, he broke. Tears spilled silently down his cheeks as he leaned in and gathered her into his arms. She was burning up, her little body trembling. He held her close, rocking her gently. "I'm here," he choked out. "I'm not going anywhere, I promise." He stayed like that the whole night. Didn't move, didn't sleep, just held her, whispering comfort until her fever broke at dawn. When Hannah entered the room the next morning, she found them still in the rocking chair. Anna curled up, sleeping peacefully, and Harold broken and healing all at once. His eyes were red, his shirt was soaked with sweat and tears, but his arms were steady. He looked up at Hannah, something raw and wordless in his face, and she knew he had finally let himself feel it. Not just grief, but love. Real, terrifying, beautiful love. And she knew in that moment none of them would ever be the same again. They hadn't seen him in years. Daniel Marks, Hannah's brother-in-law, the only living relative from her late husband's side, showed up on a Sunday morning without warning, a stern expression and a suit too stiff for sincerity. "I heard you're letting some CEO play house with my niece," he said coldly, standing on their porch. "That's not family, Hannah. That's convenience." Hannah stood frozen, her arms instinctively shielding the door behind her. "You've never even met her," she said quietly, "which is exactly why I want to change that. I'm filing for legal guardianship. Do you think a billionaire can give her what she really needs? Stability? Morals?" He sneered. "You're not thinking clearly. You're just desperate." Harold stood behind her, silent, his fists clenched at his sides. Hannah's heart raced, her world suddenly tipping. She had fought for so long to build something gentle, something safe, and now someone from a past she had buried was trying to rip it away. The courtroom was cold, far colder than the snow-covered streets outside. Rows of wooden benches stood rigid and silent, like the people sitting on them. The judge sat high above, robed in black, eyes unreadable as he shuffled through the case file. At the front, little Anna sat beside Harold, her tiny fingers locked tightly around his hand. Her feet dangled above the floor, unable to reach, but her presence filled the space as if she were the tallest person in the room. Across from them sat Daniel Marks, rigid, polished, and proud. He leaned forward at the table, eyes sharp with purpose. "This man," Daniel said, motioning toward Harold, "is not family. He is a temporary distraction, a wealthy outsider who has known this child for what? Weeks? Months? I want what's best for Anna, and what's best for her is blood, stability, not a fantasy built on fairy tales." Murmurs fluttered through the crowd. The judge raised a hand. "And does love matter in this court, Mr. Marks?" Daniel hesitated. The question caught him off guard. Of course it does. But love doesn't negate responsibility or biology. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Then came a sound, soft, barely audible at first, a chair shifting, a small figure rising. Anna. She stood from the witness bench, a little unsteady on her feet, but burning with determination. She clutched Harold's hand even tighter as she walked to the center of the room, all eyes following her. The bailiff took a step forward, uncertain, but the judge motioned for silence. Anna stopped in front of the bench and looked up. "My name is Anna Grace," she said, voice trembling but clear, "and I already have a daddy." Gasps broke out behind her. Daniel blinked, stunned. "He reads to me every night," Anna continued, her chin lifting slightly. "He never yells. He makes mommy smile. He holds my hand when I'm scared, and he never makes me feel small." The courtroom went silent. Anna turned toward Harold. "I don't want a new one," she said. "I already picked him." Harold blinked hard, the sting of tears rising in his eyes. The judge leaned back slowly, exhaled, and after a long moment said with quiet authority, "In light of the emotional testimony, the demonstrable bond between the child and Mr. Blake, and the absence of a stable prior relationship with Mr. Marks, this court denies the petition for guardianship." A sharp breath escaped Hannah's lips, her hand flying to her mouth. Anna ran back to Harold and threw her arms around him, her head pressing against his chest. And for the first time, Harold didn't feel like a man pretending to protect a child. He felt like a father, fully, finally, forever. The letter came a week later, cream-colored paper, a bold seal in the corner. Hannah held it in trembling hands, her eyes scanning the words again and again. A research position at one of the top developmental institutes in Boston. Everything she had once dreamed of back in college. Before Anna, before the struggle, before Harold. She stood in the kitchen staring out the frosted window, the city outside dusted in soft falling snow. She didn't hear him at first, just the quiet creak of the hardwood as Harold stepped behind her. "You got it," he said gently. She nodded, but her voice was low. "I'm not going." He frowned. "Why?" "Because it's too far. Anna's happy. You're here. This," she gestured to the life they'd built, "this matters more." Harold walked closer, his voice firm but kind. "Hannah, you don't give up dreams. You bring them with you." She turned to him, eyes shining. "But what if I lose what we have?" Harold didn't hesitate. He took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers like it was instinct. "Then it wasn't real enough to begin with," he said. "But I believe it is." She looked at him, the same man who once stood in a corner store, like he owned the world, now standing before her, like she was his entire world. And this time she didn't run from hope. She leaned into it. A week later, Harold planned something Anna would call the best dinner ever. They walked into the rooftop garden of his building, now transformed with warm fairy lights and a small table set for 3. Snow lined the edges of the stone path like powdered sugar. Candles flickered softly in the breeze. Anna squealed when she saw the cupcakes, but then her eyes landed on a small box in the center of her plate. Her name was written on it in Harold's handwriting. "What's this?" she whispered. "Open it," Harold smiled. Inside, nestled on velvet, was a delicate silver necklace. On the tiny charm was one engraved word, family. On the back, forever. Anna gasped. "It's for me." Harold knelt beside her. "You taught me what family means," he said, "and I want you to know, no matter where life takes us, you will always have me." Anna threw her arms around his neck, giggling. "You're my forever daddy now." Harold kissed the top of her head, his throat thick. Then he stood, turned to Hannah, and pulled a second box from his coat pocket. "Hannah," he said softly, "you walked into my life like a storm and somehow made it a home." She covered her mouth, already trembling. "This time," he said, "I'm not pretending. I don't want temporary. I don't want convenient. I want real." He opened the box, a simple ring, timeless. "Will you be my family for real?" Tears slipped down Hannah's cheeks. She nodded, unable to speak, and fell into his arms. Anna clapped her hands. "Can I be the flower girl?" Harold laughed, still holding Hannah. "You're going to be more than that." 6 weeks later, the chapel was small, sunlit, full of laughter and white roses. Anna walked down the aisle first in a white dress with a sparkling sash and a proud smile that never faded. She dropped petals in awkward little clumps and waved to every guest. Harold stood at the altar, his suit crisp, his hands only slightly trembling. When Hannah appeared, radiant in a simple ivory gown, he forgot how to breathe. Their vows were not rehearsed, not poetic, just real. "I didn't believe in second chances," Harold said, "until I met two girls who made me want to become someone worth loving." "I thought love meant sacrifice," Hannah whispered, "but you showed me it can also mean home." Anna stood beside them, beaming, her hands tightly holding both of theirs. As the ceremony ended, Harold scooped her up and kissed her forehead. "You were the one who chose me first, remember?" he said, smiling through tears. And she whispered back, proud and sure, "Best choice I ever made." That night, as snow fell quietly outside, the three of them danced in the living room, barefoot, laughing, no music but their own joy. A real family forever. And that was the story of a little girl's simple question that changed three lives forever. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with grand entrances. Sometimes it whispers through a child's voice, through second chances, and through the courage to believe that family isn't always who you're born to. It's who you choose. If this story touched your heart, made you believe in healing, in redemption, and in the quiet power of showing up, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to Open Soul Diaries. Here we bring you tales that move you, stories that remind you how beautiful the human spirit can be, and how even a stranger can become your forever. Until next time, keep holding on to hope, because the smallest voices can lead us home.